Welcome back. This is part 2 of the Burnout 101 series. And today we're going to look at how to break the burnout cycle. So, first of all, just put in the comment section your name, your role, your location, so we can see who is watching the video, who is curious about preventing burnout and achieving sustainable high performance and success. So, what to expect in today's video? It is part 2 of 3, as I said before. And we are going to start with recapping what burnout is, which is what part 1 was about. And feel free to go back and watch that before you watch this one. But today is more specifically, we want to look at what burnout really looks like when you live in a burnout cycle. And more importantly, how to break that cycle. Because far too many of us are living in a cycle of burnout without even knowing it. And you can't prevent something you don't understand, ultimately. So my name is Tabira Jones. I am a founder, a speaker, a life coach. I work with corporate brands to help them retain top performing talent by fireproofing their people from burnout. And I work with talented professionals like yourself to achieve work-life success, a lifestyle that you love to live and a career that you love to actually go and achieve great things in. Outside of what I do, who I am an auntie, a sister, a friend, a daughter, a disciple of Jesus. And having a clear delineation between what I do and who I am has been really important in me achieving sustainable success in my own life, as well as fireproofing myself from burnout. So, the reason why I talk about burnout is because I'm obsessed with sustainable high performance and success. Far too many of us are achieving great things in our life at the cost of our health and vitality, and it doesn't have to be that way. The truth is, we need to work to live, yes, but we also need to be able to live to work, aka have the good health in order to achieve sustainability in our work, in our life, and actually really stop existing and truly start living. With that being said, we all understand that performance can be a bit of a journey. And in fact, performance is similar to like an ECG heart monitor in a hospital. If you're in a hospital and your ECG monitor looks like this, you'd be okay, right? But if it looked like this, if your heart monitor looked like this, there'd be a problem. And it's the same with our performance. Things aren't going to be linear. Our performance is going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to fluctuate with the natural rhythm of life, of work. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, quick story time as to why we're speaking about this. Now, I am someone who had the perfect work-life balance, and I truly did. I went to the gym 6 times a week, sometimes twice a day, predominantly plant-based, meditated religiously. And when the reporting season was over, as an investment analyst, as soon as that season was over, I was on a flight with the girls to a 5-star all-inclusive hotel in the tropics. I had a perfect work-life balance on paper. Until one day I went to bed with the flu, and the next morning I woke up and I couldn't feel anything below my waist. I then started losing my eyesight. And within 1 year, I was diagnosed with highly active, relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, which was the ultimate wake-up call I needed to realize I had been living in a burnout cycle. I had been living in a 4-year-long burnout cycle that started when I completed my economics degree with my mum in a coma. I got a first-class dissertation. I wrote that in 48 hours, handed it 1 minute before a deadline with my mum in a coma. So performance was there, but then I had a huge crash once I graduated. And part of that crash was being diagnosed with sepsis. I spent 7 days in hospital fighting off sepsis. I then survived that and started my job in the investment industry 4 days after my mum's funeral. And within 9 months of being in the investment industry, post my mum's funeral, that's when I went to bed with the flu and I woke up the next morning and couldn't feel anything below my hips. So I am someone who has experienced great things at the cost of my health repeatedly. And it was a 4-year-long burnout cycle until I decided that it was time to end it. Now, for the last 6 years, I have been in a place where I've been able to create a life that I love. I've been able to create a career that I absolutely love, and without burning out in that time, which is a really big deal because when you have multiple sclerosis, it's somewhat like a superpower. Your body, when you have MS, reacts quite adversely to stress and quite immediately to stress, which means that when I experience high stress situations, I lose the ability to control my body. And for the last 6 years, I have been relapse free from multiple sclerosis without any medical intervention, simply by practicing what I preach and living what I teach. And that is what I will be sharing today. So let's begin. How to break the burnout cycle. Imagine there are two people. They've got the same performance, both achieving great things at work, both taking time off when they need to. On the surface, things look pretty similar. However, if we take a closer look from person A and person B, whilst their performance might look the same, their well-being is in completely different states. As we can see, person A, great performance, but they're living between thriving and recovering. They are literally thriving in life, thriving in work, and their base point, their lowest point is in recovery. This is what I like to call the empowered performance zone, which we'll talk about more later. On the other hand, we've got person B at the bottom of the chart. And whilst they are performing at the same rate as person A at work, in their personal life, their well-being is going between surviving and recovering. They are constantly running on fumes. They are exhausted. They are anxious, depressed. The best they ever feel is like they're just about recovering, just about getting their head above the water before they start surviving again. Both of these people have the same performance at work, but behind the scenes in their personal life, their well-being are in two different worlds. And our goal is to get you from making sure that you're not in the burnout danger zone, but you're actually living in that empowered performance zone where you're going from recovering to thriving, and say goodbye to surviving, simply recovering, and surviving yet again. So the empowered performance zone is where we want to be. We want our performance to be empowered by our well-being, by a sense of fulfillment, purpose, and direction. And a lot of people have lost that, particularly post-pandemic. Before the pandemic, at the time, we saw that 54% of working days were lost due to stress-related ill health in the UK. By the time we were let out of lockdown, the percentage of working days lost due to stress-related ill health actually increased to 84%. Now, my theory for that increase, despite the fact the world had reopened, we could go to the theatre, go on holiday, go back to the gym and create our work-life balance once again. My theory is that during the lockdown, when we weren't distracted with the things that we call work-life balance activities, we were confronted with the reality that we were feeling unfulfilled, that we were feeling lost, that we were feeling dissatisfied in our own personal lives. And when the world reopened so we can re-engage in those activities, they couldn't master reality. They couldn't master truth that we were now confronted with, which means a lot of us are living in that burnout danger zone of surviving and recovering and not truly living in an empowered performance zone of thriving and recovering, which is why we're here today. It is time to break that cycle. So a quick recap if you missed part one, because it's a foundational element of achieving sustainable success and high performance in your life. There is a difference between being run down and being burnt out. Imagine using your laptop all day. A very hard thing to imagine, I know. And eventually your laptop dies. Not a big deal, right? We simply put it onto charge and in no time at all, we can carry on using it. That's what it means to be run down. To be run down is simply a depletion of your energy. It's a very normal and natural response to working in a high intensity, time pressured, high stress environment for a defined period of time. Burnout, on the other hand, imagine using your laptop all day. No matter how long you put it on to charge, it won't turn back on, or if it does, it can no longer function at its optimum. That's what it means to be burnt out. It is no longer an energy issue. It's no longer a depletion of the battery, but it's a hardware issue. You need to hit reset and take it to the manufacturers. That's what it means to be burnt out. Now, you can actually have a cycle of being run down, which is not the same as being in a burnout cycle. And a rundown cycle simply looks like you're working really hard on a project, on a report, it's got an impending deadline, you know it's only for a moment in time. You start to feel run down because you are giving it your all, you are giving it the absolute best to make sure you're doing it at a high caliber, high standard, because, you know, we're high performers, that's what we do, right? But that's fine, because once we hit that deadline, once that project is over, we give ourselves permission to rest, recharge, and reset so that we can recover and then go back to working hard on the next project. And that's incredibly important because we need to make sure that we're building a lifestyle that enables us to rest, recharge, and reset during high intensity, high pressure moments that can either happen at work or in our personal lives. And that is what we're going to be talking about in part 3, how to eliminate the threat of burnout. But for now, we're going to focus on this cycle. So this particular cycle is very natural. It's like the performance. We're going to work really hard. We're going to give ourselves time to rest, recharge, and recover. And then we're going to work hard again. That is the natural flow, the natural rhythm when it comes to achieving great things. The rundown cycle is short term. It has a defined end period. It has defined parameters as opposed to ambiguity as to what you're supposed to be doing. You know very clearly within that period of time what's required of you, why you're doing it, and how you need to do it. But it also can just be recovered with rest. Once you allow yourself to rest, recharge, and reset, you are good to go again. You are back to your optimum, aka a laptop. When the battery dies, you put it onto charge and you can continue using it. That is what the rundown cycle is. It's a very short-term defined period of time due to high intensity, high pressures, high demands, but you can recover with rest alone. Burnout, on the other hand, is incredibly different. It's that laptop that no matter how long you leave it on charge, it won't turn back on or function at its optimum. Now, the myth around burnout is that it's something that is produced by high exposure to stress. And that's only partly true, because if you have a defined period of stress, like working on a project or a report, you won't actually burn out from that. And that's because the reality of burnout is it requires more than stress alone to be present for you to actually be at risk of experiencing burnout. So while stress is a factor, another factor is anxiety. The stress, you feel overwhelmed by the demands, the pressure, the intensity. Anxiety, personally, you lose sight of who you are, you lose sight of sense of security, sense of peace. And then the last component is depression. Now, when you're feeling depression, you feel this loss of hope, of direction, of purpose in your life. And the truth is, burnout occurs when all three of these things are happening simultaneously. So stress alone does not cause burnout, but it very much is a factor. Burnout occurs when you are feeling overwhelmed by the stress, you are feeling unfulfilled because of depression, and you're feeling large amounts of uncertainty due to a constant exposure to anxiety. And it's these things that we have to address in order for the burnout cycle to be broken in its entirety. So the burnout cycle differs from the rundown cycle because with the burnout cycle, you're working hard continuously, but without defined parameters. It's just you're constantly working hard. You're on that hamster wheel. You're not giving yourself any time to pause or think. You're just existing. You're removing an automation. You're not actually giving yourself an opportunity to really pause and reflect on why it is you're working and what you're doing. Then you get to a point where you're running on fumes. So you actually haven't stopped to rest. You haven't acknowledged that you're feeling run down. You haven't acknowledged that you're in need of a break. You decide to carry on working hard and push through that, which means you get to a point of running on fumes. Once you can no longer run on fumes, you then find yourself forced to take a break. Your body has told you it's no longer going to function. And that can be with headaches, it could be with migraines, it can be with short-term illnesses like a cold or a flu. It could also be things like actually your boss has told you it's time to take your annual leave that you haven't taken. So instead of realizing that you're in need of a break, that you're in need of rest, in fact, you're running on fumes because you haven't stopped working hard, even though you haven't got any reserves left in your tank, and you're forced to take a short break. And the break is only short because you feel too anxious to take any longer time away from work. So you end up returning back to work, running on fumes once again, repeating that cycle of working hard, running on fumes, being forced to take a break for whatever reason, or even taking a break and still not feeling rest, recharged, and able to reset, which means you just return back to work running on fumes. And this is what I did for 4 consecutive years in my life. That short break, sepsis, wasn't enough to stop me. Losing my mother, taking compassionate leave, I didn't take compassionate leave. However, finally being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that was the thing that made me decide that it's time to change the way I'm living. There had to be more to life than constantly living in that cycle of working hard, running on fumes, taking a fabulous holiday that looked great on social media, but returning not rested, running on fumes again, and then working hard. I had been living in a burnout danger zone, and it was time to put an end to that. So the whole point of today's session is I want to help you have the key points to begin transitioning yourself from that burnout danger zone into the empowered performance zone so you can achieve work-life success both in your personal life and your professional life. AKA create a lifestyle that you actually love to live and a career that you love to actually go and work and excel and achieve in. So let's start with the first component, stress. Now, stress is like fire. That's why it's seen as one of the most prevalent factors of burnout, because it's the most obvious one. Now, stress is just like fire in that when it's productive, it's well managed. When it is mismanaged, it can be catastrophic. But more importantly, when we don't know it's occurring, because we're so accustomed to managing, living in, dealing with high stress situations, we start to fail to recognize when things have got out of control. And that's when it can become fatal. Now, if stress is like fire, then burnout is like a house fire. And imagine calling a fire brigade because your house is on fire. And their response is, we're really sorry we can't make it, but could you please just breathe in and breathe out? I don't know about you, but I'd be incredibly annoyed if that was their response. Yet this is a response that we're often told by professionals to just take a break, to go on holiday, take some time away from work, meditate, go to yoga, go for a run. You can do all of that, but your house is still on fire, which means it's not actually a suitable solution. So if we think back to the burnout cycle, if we are not giving ourselves the opportunity to actually deal with the fires in our life, we're just running on fumes, we're just trying to push past it, trying to ignore it or mask it with this beautiful work-life balance, which is what I did, your house is still burning and the issue hasn't been resolved. The second component is anxiety. Now, when it comes to anxiety, it actually has the same physiological response as excitement in our body. So it's really hard sometimes to differentiate between what we're feeling and what the reality of that is on our body. So when we have this high stress situations in our life, our immune system is on overdrive. And when we add anxiety to that mix, it adds further fuel to our immune system that's already on fire. But excitement can do the same thing. So it's really important to distinguish between the two so you know how to deal with it appropriately so you're not actually causing your body more harm. And one way I like to do this is to think about wasps, bees, and butterflies. Hear me out. So anxiety is like a wasp. They are pesky creatures that do no good. Just like a wasp, they can sting you repeatedly. They have no productivity. They're just absolutely awful. Now imagine living in a room that has a wasp nest. How many of us would be able to sleep peacefully in that room? I don't know about you, but I definitely couldn't. So anxiety is like wasps. They are unfounded, they're unproductive, they're also unhelpful and very harmful. And we need to learn to eliminate the wasp nest so that we can increase our capacity to deal with the uncertainty that life throws at us. Because uncertainty is a natural part of life. And when we have a negative perception of the uncertain event, that's where anxiety exists. And when we allow ourselves to take a step back and assess the situation properly, to reframe our mindset around the uncertain situation, we can eliminate the anxiety. Next, we have nervousness, which is similar to anxiety in that we have a negative perception of the uncertain situation, but they're more like bees. So bees, just like wasps, they can sting you. However, bees serve a purpose in that they can produce honey. Now, we can have situations that can arise, for example, at work. We have been given a new role, a new report, a new task to do that feels a bit out of our depth and can make us feel nervous. And whilst we feel nervous because we have a negative perception that we may not be able to perform to our highest in this role because it's new, it's uncertain, we also understand that if we go for it, if we push past nervousness, we can produce honey. By going for that role, by completing that task, that report, it can help us to increase our professional portfolio. So nervousness, whilst it's uncomfortable, they're just like bees in that if we can manage them appropriately and safely, they can produce honey, which is a sweet and beautiful outcome that will help us either create the life or the career or both that we want. And then lastly is excitement, because excitement is the other side of that coin. As I said, excitement has the same physiological response as anxiety and nervousness does. However, the difference with anxiety is when you think about the uncertain situation, you have a positive expectation of the outcome. Think of a surprise birthday party, for example. Imagine someone who knows you incredibly well, who loves you, is throwing you a surprise birthday party. You don't know what's going to happen at that party, but you have a positive expectation because you know you love and you trust this person, which means you're filled with excitement and maybe you feel me a little nervousness, but mostly excitement. And it's really important to understand these three different elements because if you are already living in a state of high stress, aka you're living in a house fire, these three things can just add to more fuel, more discomfort to your situation if we don't know which one are which. And we're going to come back to this in a moment. And then the last one is depression. The last factor of burnout is depression. Now, when it comes to depression, people experience depression due to a lack of fulfillment in their life, and that lack of fulfillment is due to lack of purpose. If you don't believe me, just think about it. It's really hard to be depressed when you're fulfilled. Now, to make this clear, when I talk about depression, I'm talking about environmental situational depression, not clinical depression. I'm talking about the depression that's not related to the chemical, the synapses, maybe lack of receptors in our body, the physiological, biological sense. I'm talking about the depression that actually most people, when they talk about depression, are referring to. It's that feeling of not knowing where you're going, the purpose in life, a sense of direction, a clear vision, aspiration, hopes and dreams that are actually intrinsically yours and not inherited by society, your family, and so forth. Because a lot of us have inherited expectations and obligations of those around us. And we're not actually living a fulfilled life. We're constantly seeking validation. And the more you seek validation, the more exposed you are to depression. Because the gap between the life that you're currently living and the life that you truly want to live, because who you want to be, how you want to live is who you truly are. When you turn down the noise of the expectations of the rest of the world, that gap between the life you're living and the life you truly want to live is where depression sits, because that is the chasm of unfulfillment. So in order to deal with depression, we have to locate our North Star. We have to finally stop and say, what is it that I want to do? What is it I want to achieve, experience? And more importantly, who do I want to be? Instead of playing a character that I've inherited because of other people's expectations, who do I truly want to be? And when you can answer that question, it completely revolutionizes your life. So anxiety, stress, and depression, when those three things occur, that's when the burnout cycle is prevalent. So today, the action plan for you to break that burnout cycle, we need to do three things. We need to learn how to put out the fires, aka the unnecessary stress in our life. For example, in my life, debt was one of the unnecessary stress that I had. I had £8,500 worth of consumer debt because I decided that retail therapy was easier than natural therapy. And it was easier, it just wasn't wise. And when I put in a plan to pay off £7,500 in 5 months so I could have the greater financial flexibility to resign from my investment job, that enabled me to put out that fire of stress, of financial stress, of being obligated to go to work so that I could prioritize my health. I took myself out of the burning building so I can then ask myself, what is it I want to do in life, and give myself permission to start to truly recover and rest instead of continue running on fumes. I then allowed myself to eliminate the wasp nest in my life. So the wasp nest is area of anxiety. One thing I did was I went to therapy to help me to change the narrative, to reframe how I saw uncertainty, because I had been living a tumultuous life of trauma and uncertainty. And I needed to learn how to properly manage that, to reframe situations, to be able to identify my wasps from my bees and my bees from my butterflies, and really increase my capacity to see past all the hurt, all the trauma, all the grief, all the pain, which enabled me then to go to the next step, which was to relocate my North Star, to ask myself for the first time in my life, who is it that I want to be? What is it I want to do? And in doing so, it enabled me to go from being a burnt out mess, anxiously depressed investment analyst, to becoming an award-winning burnout prevention specialist, speaker, consultant, life coach, and really loving the life that I currently live. So my encouragement to you to break the burnout cycle is to do something different. Allow yourself to put out the fires in your life, aka the unnecessary stress. Allow yourself to eliminate the wasp nest. Go to therapy, seek the support and help to reframe your mindset, your focus, your perception on uncertain situations, because life is full of uncertainty. We just need to learn how to harness that more. But then, most importantly, locate your North Star. For the first time, probably ever, sit down and have an honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself, who do I want to be? Because who I want to be is who I truly am on the inside when I turn down the noise of societal expectations, family obligations, and my current circumstances. So that was part 2 of this 3-part series. And I look forward to seeing you in part 3, which is how we eliminate the threat of burnout for the future. See you soon.